Welcome everyone to today's webinar on how to troubleshoot Citrix and Google Chromebook issues. We are very excited here at Goliath Technologies to really be featuring one of our partners and users of our technology, SSI. And we'll learn a little bit more about SSI in a few minutes, but we are lucky enough to have 3 individuals that are going to be participating today. We have Scott Urosky, who is the CTO and really runs a lot of the technical decisions and strategy for SSI. We have Simon Beanie, who's been there over 10 years, really director of business development, working extremely closely with their clients. And then Aaron Hiserote, who's technical quality assurance manager, and he's going to be really talking about how he troubleshoots some of these issues around Chromebook and Citrix on a day-to-day basis, and how he uses Goliath to overcome some challenges that he used to have prior to using the technology. Just to finish rounds of introductions, because we've got lots of speakers, I also have Avi Litt, who is going to be showing Goliath technology today and how to use it to troubleshoot. And then by way of introduction, my name is Stacy Leidwinger, and I'm part of the marketing team here at Goliath. One additional slide to do some housekeeping as we wait for people to join. In terms of agenda and flow today, we're going to do a little bit of introduction around who SSI is and some of the challenges that they were facing as they worked with their clients to deploy Chromebook on Citrix. And then I'll give a little bit of an update on who Goliath is for those who are not familiar. And then from there, we'll go through an example deployment and talk through how SSI deployed Chromebooks, how they use Goliath, and then we'll actually show in the demonstration how they did troubleshoot some of those issues. Please do submit any questions you have in the Q&A box. We'll try to answer them throughout, and if not, we'll save them for the end. We really like to make this as interactive as possible, so please do not hold back. One question we always get is this recording going to be available? Yes, within 24 hours, you'll have a copy of this recording in your inbox. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Simon Beanie, who is going to talk a little bit about who SSI is and some of those initial challenges that they were facing before meeting Goliath. Simon?
Good afternoon, everyone. And as Stacy said, thank you for joining us today. My name is Simon Beanie, and I'm the Director of Business Development here at SSI. I'll keep the opening statements brief this afternoon and allow us to focus more time on our topic, troubleshooting Citrix and Chromebook issues. But by way of background, and to give you some context of who SSI is, what we do, and why we utilize and partner with Goliath, SSI has been supporting mid-market and enterprise clients with business IT solutions for over 32 years now. We started many, many years ago with managed services and the procurement of hardware, you know, when hardware was the key commodity in service delivery. We moved into managed services, as I said, and then we've progressed into cloud infrastructure. That's both private and public cloud. We've built out a robust project practice in the last 4 years, and we've recently launched a cybersecurity division. And all this is really built to serve the needs of our customers as a comprehensive technology provider. Our clients span nationwide. Typically, they're complex, multi-location environments, often including international users. And while we are industry agnostic, we do have a significant presence in healthcare, which is our case study example today, as well as education, finance, and manufacturing, to name a few. Our team is well-versed in complex deployments. We navigate the requirements of IT from both the business perspective and an end user's perspective, And we implement tools such as Goliath to help either you, the end client, or SSI, the management company, ensure a successful engagement. Finally, I put co-managed IT on this slide. I say this because we believe IT is a partnership. And ultimately, our success and your success is built on the services we have designed to fulfill your needs, both at the IT, a business, and a strategic level. Our project management office, our technical operations and services teams, all the way through to our procurement teams, are all designed to support existing IT leadership, like everyone on this call, with services, ITIL framework-based support, and exceptional levels of customer experience. I'll move on now and we'll talk about where we've all been. You know, SSI has seen this, you've all seen this as IT professionals. We all know delivering technology at this level isn't easy. Everyone, I'm sure, has had their challenges that they've faced. And one of those which makes this particularly frustrating is often a lack of understanding from the end user. This often creates misdirected frustration, it creates negative connotations of IT or a specific technology, or even a department. And ultimately that, you know, mistrust or dissatisfaction is quite frequently misguided. End users often spend too much time finger pointing on who's to blame when issues arise. The lack of visibility into root cause performance issues. You know, people assume it's the device, it's not Citrix, or they assume it's Citrix, not the device. Quite often we hear any and all issues on Chrome or Windows to be referred to as a Citrix problem. Citrix is slow, Citrix is clunky. It's a lack of insight and understanding that gives the end user that perception. We do also see poor communication between IT teams, management, and vendors. There's a gap in objective data and analytics to objectively prove root cause. SSI has navigated this using Goliath tools in a both proactive and reactive approach. And finally, a reliance on subjective end user feedback and apathy around performance. These are all things that we've seen on both Chromebooks, Windows operating system, and Macs. But today's topic, we're focusing on Chromebooks. One of the reasons for that is the dramatic surge of 2020, right? The stat that Stacy was able to pull is 122% year-over-year growth in Q3. That's significant. And we know a lot was driven by the pandemic, the immediate shift to work from home and healthcare and education primarily. At SSI, seen this ourselves. We had clients looking extensively to procure Chromebooks, and we couldn't simply get them in the quantities needed. Partly that's because Chromebooks are in demand as a low-cost device, and while there are high-end Chromebooks in the marketplace, typically we see the demand for the lower-end end-user Chromebooks. Their simplistic nature, their implied security levels, their price point, and to some, the demand is driven because Chromebooks are almost considered disposable technology when you compare that to the cost of repairing or prepping a traditional laptop. So we've seen the demand, and I think at this point, I'll pass back to Stacy to start the poll and give us an idea of how the audience is currently situated.
Great. So if everyone could take a minute, this will help us tailor our presentation. We're really interested to know, where are you in your Chromebook rollout, right? Have you completed it? And so you're looking for some tips on how to improve the user experience. Is this something planned for 2021? Is it something that's under consideration and you're starting to weigh the benefits versus cost? Or you have no plans and maybe you joined us hoping to learn some tips and tricks around Citrix. So let me give a few minutes to go ahead and see where we end up here on the results. But really what this will do, again, will allow us to tailor some of those answers. Even before the webinar here, we were talking about where we're seeing the dominance of Chromebook. And as Simon said, as more employees went remote and maybe didn't have access to laptops, it really can be a great alternative. And the Chromebook itself can provide significant value, but still at the end of the day, it still comes back to the applications. And can the applications you need work on those Chromebooks? So with that, let's go ahead and see where the audience stacks up. There we are. So we are about 20% are completed, 10% of the audience is planning it, 10% under consideration, and 60% no plans. So we've got, I'm hoping the ones with no plans have a lot of Citrix interest. And good news for you, we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about Citrix today. So even if you're not using Chromebook, the same troubleshooting workflows will apply for you. All right. Now with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott that's going to talk about some of the specific challenges that he's heard as Chromebooks are rolled out in organizations.
Thank you, Stacy. This is Scott Yarovsky. I'm SSI CTO, and I've been with SSI now for 25 years. With our Chromebook rollouts, we've seen many points of failures or issues. even before the client even connects to their apps or desktops. One of the big complaints we get is we have some slowness, or we're getting disconnected. Usually the end user then starts to blame IT or the computer equipment, or they just don't like Citrix. They're trying to find ways around Citrix. It usually takes too much time to have the user try to troubleshoot on their own. They're in their home office, maybe they have wireless, maybe they have some connection issues. There's many different areas of failures between the endpoint, whether it's Chromebook or other endpoints, all the way making it to the end user session, whether it's a published app or published desktop. So it's hard to tell where the issues are coming from. It could be disk latency, it could be network latency, they could be having internet issues, they could be having wireless issues, and there's a lack of visibility with the general default tools that you have, whether it's using Citrix Director to see what VDA they're connecting to, trying to figure out if there may be too many users on a VDA, or a VDA doesn't have the right resources. You're logging into generalized network tools looking for latency, network issues. Maybe it's a NetScaler issue, maybe there's some switch or router issues. There's really not one place to look with the general tools that come with the hypervisors, with the network devices, and with Citrix. So what usually happens, there's multiple teams involved trying to figure out where the issues are coming from, and it takes a while to then figure out for the end user, troubleshoot the end user's issues. It's taken a long time to get to the end result of where the problem is, and all this time the user is blaming their endpoint, in the Chromebook in this case. So this is one of the reasons that we've turned to Goliath, because it's one tool, one portal that can get us to where the issue's coming from, whether it's something at the home user's network, and especially with COVID, the past 9 months or so, with many more people working from home, diagnosing these issues has been a lot more streamlined and much easier using the Goliath tools, because we can get directly to where the issue's coming from, whether it's a wireless access point, whether it's something in the data center, something on a server, something on the network. We can get to it and get to it quickly, and then be able to resolve the end user's issues within a decent amount of time, where they're not waiting, whether it's hours, days, or weeks to get their issues resolved. And with that, I would like to turn to Stacy to talk more through Goliath.
Scott. And really, whenever we kind of met with Scott, right, what we offered him was access to our purpose-built software that comes with embedded intelligence and automation. And what that means is everything you just saw Scott show, all of that complexity, we can automatically discover and map that entire Citrix environment. We can identify what to monitor, how to monitor it, and we set thresholds based on industry best practices from Citrix, VMware, Microsoft, our own knowledge. And it's because of that we can get up and running very quickly. And there's several areas where we help organizations like SSI. We can really, with those threshold-based alerts, anticipate issues so that the administrator knows when there's an issue, when there's slowness. Maybe there's a maxed out VDA server. Maybe the hypervisor host is running out of memory. We can alert and let you know of those factors so you can address them before end users are impacted. What we're going to show quite a bit of here in a few minutes then is really how to use the analytics and metrics we provide to troubleshoot and prove root cause of end user issues. Is it because of the Chromebook or the endpoint? Is it something to do within the Citrix infrastructure or Horizon infrastructure if we have any VMware customers on the line today? Or is it something that has to do with end user behavior as well as their connection point? I do see we have some health systems, so we also offer purpose-built modules for all the major EHR systems, from Epic, Cerner, Meditech, Allscripts, so that we can give you end-to-end visibility on performance, not only for the underlying infrastructure, but those EHR modules as well. And finally, and we're going to talk a little bit more of this at the end here, we can document those end user experience, what's going on, what's logon times, usage, activity, productivity of the users, all so that you can, one, trend over time and make sure that you're continually meeting your SLAs to the business, but also you have that reports that you can go back and prove that you've addressed issues and those issues no longer exist for your end users. And what our customers tell us is that when they've implemented a solution like this, they truly transform from reactive to proactive. And I hit a little bit on the embedded intelligence and automation, but this is really critical and I think a big differentiator that you're going to see. We know that for many users, the three areas of complaints that happen is at logon initiation, logon duration, and session performance. So we have over 250 elements, some that you see on the screen, that we are proactively monitoring and alerting on anytime performance has slowed down. This really allows to have that transformation and proactively address issues. This is absolutely critical whether you're rolling out a Citrix upgrade or you're rolling out a new Chromebook deployment, that you get ahead of issues so that you're not reliant on the subjective feedback that comes back from end users. And I think it's even harder to get some of that feedback now that everyone's outside of the office and remote. And it's because of this intelligence that I'm talking about here, that if you look at the logos on the screen, our customers will all tell you that by leveraging Goliath, it's as if operationally they've added 2 to 3 full-time troubleshooting experts. And we have Aaron on the line that can either back me up or challenge me on that because he's in the system daily. And what you'll see is that we can scale to some of the largest deployments, but we also have an ease of use and price profile that will allow us to support medium to size as well as small organizations. You can see we're across industry, but I mentioned again, we really are known as the healthcare IT standard because we have the technical and business relationship with all those major EHR vendors. And what we hear in healthcare, and I'm sure Scott, you could back this up, is in healthcare, if any of you are on the phone here, you have half the resources, half the budget as your enterprise counterparts, all trying to support the same end goal. And in fact, in some cases, that goal is even more urgent because you're working with clinicians that might be going into the operating room. They absolutely need to access patient records. And if they can't get to those records in a timely manner, it's impacting the quality of patient care. So with that little bit on Goliath, I'm going to turn it over to Scott, who's now going to talk about how SSI deployed Chromebooks, Citrix, as well as Goliath for one of their organizations that they support. Scott?
Thank you, Stacy. We're actually right in the middle of a large healthcare deployment of Chromebooks. It's 500 Chromebooks being deployed over multiple locations with this particular healthcare client. This healthcare client is also, we're building a Citrix deployment within Azure for mainly Chromebooks be able to connect to the Citrix deployment. They're using their EHR software, they're using line of business applications, they're using payroll apps. And a lot of times these Chromebooks are also mobile. So the people that work at these locations, a lot of times they're moving from location to location and they're also working from home. So SSI went to Goliath tools to build this proactively versus trying to troubleshoot after the deployment has been completed. So while building the infrastructure in Azure, SSI deployed Goliath tools while we built Goliath tools into all of our images for this client. Once we built the base infrastructure for Citrix, we were then able to test the Chromebooks at each location to make sure the end-to-end connectivity was working as expected and that there weren't any network issues, wireless issues, internet issues connecting from the Chromebook into Azure, into the Citrix infrastructure. This has dramatically helped us with the end user experience because during the rollout, when the users received their Chromebooks and logged in for the first time, the experience was what they were expecting. It was smooth everything was fast. We didn't get the calls that everyone usually hears, whether I'm getting disconnected from my application or my desktop, or my application is running slow. We were able to make sure that everything was in place and configured properly using Goliath tools, that we were make sure that everything was running at the level it should, and all of the hosted desktop and published apps ran at the speeds they should run and what was expected by the end users. We also configured Goliath's application availability monitor from the start to monitor the logins to the desktops and to the applications to make sure that they were able to get to the desktop and the application completely launched. If something failed, we would be alerted immediately, so we knew that there was either the application access or the desktop access wasn't available, so we could immediately troubleshoot and make sure that it was up and running for the users within a short amount of time. And with that, I'd like to turn this over to Aaron for some troubleshooting scenarios.
Hi, all. My name is Aaron Heiserode. I'm the Technical Quality Assurance Manager, and I've worked extensively with this product over several months now, and we use it with our support desk to be able to assist our customers and find resolutions much faster than you would with the typical built-in Citrix tools such as Citrix Director. So one of our very common scenarios is we get a call and the end user just says that everything seems slow on the Chromebook. And being that the Chromebooks are fairly limited in terms of what you can do locally, the end user doesn't really know anything besides that the Chromebook is slow. So as a result, we need to do a little bit of troubleshooting. And using Goliath, we can see that a lot of different metrics about the user's connection. So we can see different ICA latencies, we can find potential problems with bandwidth and other issues. So we can look at the different resources. We can very quickly see that it is not a server-side issue. The virtual delivery agent's devices are fine on system resources, CPU, etc., and other users are connected to the same systems without any issues. So you can see that very quickly with the Goliath tools. And inside, when you drill down into the user's connection, you can see that the latency is 1200 milliseconds, which is well beyond any kind of desired latency for any kind of connection of any sort. So that would lead us to believe that there is an issue locally with the client's internet connection. And we see this all the time now with all the work from home, with all the different devices competing for bandwidth and other things. And sometimes it's just the end user's networking equipment just needs a reboot. So in a lot of these particular cases, we can just have the end user unplug and plug their wireless router or wireless access point back in and let everything flush out. And very frequently, it's fixing the issues. So with that, I'll turn it over to Avi to give some demonstrations of the actual Goliath software. Unfortunately, we can't show you our portal itself. As you can imagine, it has a lot of client information in there. So Avi will be able to give you a demo on that.
Yep. Thanks, Aaron. I'll be demoing this from one of our lab environments here at Goliath. And so what I'm going to share right now is our Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop session display. And this is where our users come either when the technology has proactively alerted you about performance issues, or if end users have put in a support ticket or are complaining about poor performance. And this section of the technology populates with all the Citrix sessions in your environment. And something that's important to note is that these aren't just for your active sessions, but these are also for your historical sessions as well. We don't average or roll up any of our data, so you get the same level of granular detail for a session that took place, a month and a half ago as you would for a active session. So when users will say that, hey, Citrix has been slow for 2 weeks, you can pull up all of those user sessions real easily. Now, today's topic is Chromebooks. And so in this environment, we have the Chromebook name as the HTML 8168. And so I'm just going to say if a user was having problems on their Chromebook, it's very easy to be able to pull up by just typing into the quick filter section in the top right, any text on the screen, and this will dynamically search for it. So right here, are these user sessions when logging into Citrix from a Chromebook. Then when you identify a session that you want to investigate into what could be causing the poor performance, all you have to do is click on the user, and what will populate is a screen that has all of the high-level key data points that went into this user session. So you have the, how they connected in with the, what endpoint that they were using, a Chromebook in this case, how they connected in, whether it's, NetScaler or the storefront server. You have additional tabs where you have Logon Duration metrics, ICA and HDX connection metrics. Move into the data center where you have your session host. You can integrate with your hypervisor layer as well, the processes, as well as the alerts and event logs. Now, in this particular scenario, we're talking about where a remote user is having in-session performance issues. How do you quickly come to determine what the root cause of that latency is? And this user isn't having an issue, but let me flip to one that does. And where you would quickly look is this key performance metrics section right here. First, you take a look at round trip time, and this is all correlated for the time frame of the user session. And what I'm looking for here is, are there points where, say, at like 350 to 400 milliseconds is typically the industry threshold of where latency could be apparent to the end user? So I'm looking to see if round trip time was above this line here, the 350 millisecond line. If it's above the red, very likely that user's having performance issues. And so I see here that there was a point where round trip time was over 400 milliseconds. This user is potentially having an issue, not just a bad day. Now we want to determine, was the root cause more of a network related issue, or was it more of a resource utilization issue? And where you first take a look, or you could, is network latency. And this is real-time network latency from the ICA protocol itself. This isn't an ICMP or ping-based test. And what I'm looking for here is, if there's a correlation at the point where round trip time is high, is network latency also high? And immediately I see there is. At the beginning of the session, there wasn't high network latency, and when the user was having issues, network latency did increase, and all of this is time-stamped. Now I want to see, where's that latency coming from? Is it coming from that end user's location? And that's what this connection speed metric is here. This is the amount of bandwidth that is available for Citrix receiver or the workspace app at that user's location. And what I quickly see is, at the point when network latency is high, connection speed drops significantly from over 100 megabits per second all the way down to 12. So if I'm talking to an end user who's having performance issues, it's easy to come to the conclusion that they were having an issue. It was caused by the network, and specifically the drop of bandwidth available for Citrix at that user's location. And this allows you to have data-driven conversations with the end user, being like, I see you're having issues. What happened at 1048? I see a significant drop in your connection speed. And nowadays we're hearing, oh, well, you know what? That's when all the kids started streaming playing Xbox or streaming Netflix. Or it could have been something where the user just walked to another part of the house that's farther away from the router. But it gives you that objective evidence to quickly come to conclusions as far as what could be causing the poor performance. Now, another area that I do want to touch on is the ICA and HDX connection metrics here. We did just take a look at round trip time. We talked about network latency. The top right, you have connection speed at that user's location. Where I want to touch on quickly here is the bottom left chart here. This is our ICA channel usage. And with Citrix, Citrix breaks out virtual channels that give you insight into end user behavior, where you can see, based off the type of bandwidth that's being utilized within the session, what the user could have been doing, and could that have actually been a root cause of the poor performance. So you can see here at the top, you have end user experience metrics. So audio bandwidth. Was this user streaming audio? Clipboard bandwidth. Maybe a large copy and paste file was copy and paste job was what hung up the session. Thin wire bandwidth, which is the Citrix display adapter. Was this user watching something graphically intensive in their session, maybe streaming a sporting event or their favorite TV show when they were in their session? And that could have been, impacting their performance. Not all users are going to use Citrix the way how it's intended. And based off, again, the type of bandwidth that was being utilized, you can then come up with correlations where, say, at the point where the user was having issues, you see that thin wire bandwidth is spiking. You can then have a conversation with the end user as far as how, maybe streaming that graphically intensive, sporting event or whatnot was impacting the session. So those were just a couple points that I wanted to touch on quickly. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to now pass it back to Aaron for this next troubleshooting scenario. Let me pull that up. And Aaron.
Thanks, Avi. One of the other issues that we've run into very frequently is a user goes and opens their Citrix portal, and then they try to launch an application, and it might not fully load, or it might just flash on the screen and immediately close out. So at that point, the user is not really sure what's going on, and again, as happens frequently, just blames the device that they're connecting from. So what Goliath allows us to do is, from the actual portal itself, we can see all the different attempted connections that the user has made, and to see if there are any commonalities between the devices that they were connected to, the different servers, or the different resources, and really drill down into the actual connection itself. So when we open things up, we can see that different group policies are applied correctly. We can see that everything until the launch looks like it's functioning as intended. And then you can see that the session actually ends and closes out. So what that lets us do is see and compare with other users very quickly, and see that other users are connected to the same server, same resource issues, and the issue is relegated to that user. And what happens very often in these multi-session hosts or published applications is things can be tied down to the user profile, and very frequently just recreating that profile will fix the issue. So that process will take much longer without the Goliath tools. And since we have everything in a single pane of glass, we don't have to scour event logs on different servers. We don't have to dive through all sorts of other logs. We can just get it right from Goliath and check the event logs that way, and quickly come to a resolution that could have potentially taken a support team much longer to resolve, and get the user back up and running much faster than you would normally. And at this point, I can pass back to Avi for the Goliath side.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, absolutely. Oftentimes, clients who potentially have logon duration issues, they'll come to us trying to get some insight into pinpointing what the root cause of those long logons are. And with our dedicated logon duration tab, I kind of want to touch on this, because with some tools out there, you'll get about 6 to 8 different stages of the logon process. We'll give you 33 plus stages. And what you can see here is there's a high logon time. The top section, you have the brokering stage of the logon process. So, what's happening at the delivery controller, drive mapping, profile load. The top right, you can see what's going on at Citrix receiver. And all these have these Gantt charts next to them, so you can quickly be able to identify what are the major contributing factors to a logon. At the bottom here, you can see the logon stage details from the session host. So you're able to see the brokering, client server validation, authentication, where you can drill down into see which OUs that user was a part of, and the domain controller that brokered or authenticated the session. Group policies. We open up each group policy down to the policy name and how long each one took to execute, so that you can quickly identify where the major contributing factors are to a long logon. So with a workflow like this, you see a long logon time, you identify that the profile load consumed most of that time. You then take a look at group policies, you see a correlation there. And then when you drill down into the group policies, you can see here that it's a specific VDI drive mapping policy that was taking up the majority of the time, which allows you to come up again with quick conclusions as to what could be the major contributing factors to a long logon. Now, this is taking a look at a session to see the details of the logon, but there's also a proactive functionality within the technology where you can basically launch real Citrix sessions from any location, whether it's from an office branch, whether it's from a healthcare system specific hospital location, or you can have launches be taking place from the cloud, where what this piece of the technology does, it's our virtual user that's going to be logging in to Citrix or VMware Horizon the exact same way that end users would. So it would be opening up a browser to the NetScaler storefront sign-in page, entering credentials, going through the logon process, navigating the storefront page, clicking on an application or a desktop and launching it to confirm that it would work for end users. And just for an example, we'll have clients that have this deployed to run 24/7, or oftentimes clients will have this run at 6 in the morning to test to make sure that all the resources are available for the end users before they get into the office. And say with one of these launches, you receive an alert that there is a certain failure. This is where you go within the technology to analyze. This is the application availability analysis tab, and this is the central monitoring configuration console for this proactive piece of the technology. And it's broken down into two different sections. Here you can see the blue bars are an average launch time, and the yellow trend line shows the overall availability at any point in time. You can filter this based off of date and time, the specific locations where these launches are taking place from, and the specific resource that you're testing. At the bottom of the page, you have additional details such as the date and time, resource, location, and the session host, and ultimately whether the launch was successful or if it failed. Now, you have this magnifying glass here where say if you did get this was a successful launch, but say if you did get a notification that there's a failed launch, you can drill into the details of each step of the process, as well as having screenshot evidence of exactly what would have presented itself to an end user so that you don't have to ask an end user to replicate the issue because you already have this information for you right here. Just a quick example of how this can be utilized is where say we have this one healthcare client where they had a maintenance window overnight, did some updates to some applications. When they thought they were done, it ended up resulting in having the application not be published anymore. But this technology, when it launched and went to go test and click on it within the storefront, it wasn't there. So the technology sent a notification saying that this launch failed at the enumeration stage, giving those IT professionals a buffer period to get ahead of these issues before the end users were actually impacted. With that, what I'm going to do is pass it back to Aaron for another troubleshooting scenario.
Thanks, Avi.
Sure thing. There we go.
Another thing that we commonly deal with, and a lot of the issues when it comes to the end user side, is they report slowness, and that's always going to be one of the biggest complaints that we get. But it's not always the end user's connection or their actual endpoint or issues on that side. A lot of times there could be valid issues in your data center or your cloud that are preventing the user from having a good optimal performance and allowing them to get work done. So what we can utilize Goliath for is we can easily see, and again, using their software, we can find the user session and drill down directly into what actual server they're connecting to, and even which host they're running off of on their hypervisor and their VMware environment as well. So really quickly, you can see where they are connected to and see that there's resource issues. So whether it's memory or CPU, or it seems like the server is using a very large amount of storage, IOPS, you can very quickly see that there's a problem with a particular server or device there. And what that will allow IT teams to do is quickly put those devices into maintenance mode and either migrate the virtual machines to another host, or just simply put that Citrix server into a maintenance mode and have the users log out and back in so they get a new session on a new host. And that way the IT team can easily continue troubleshooting and perform any remediation necessary to get the environment back to the point that it needs to be. Then back to Avi.
Thanks, Aaron. So where I'm going to show how that can be utilized within the technology is in two different areas. The first area that I'm going to show is from a macro perspective, because part of the situation with the embedded intelligence and automation within the technology is that upon deployment, we're automatically looking for hundreds of events, conditions, failure points, and thresholds within the environment. That, in addition to automatically mapping out your Citrix delivery infrastructure here, showing the different components and how they correlate with one another. And then those monitoring rules that I just mentioned, they drive this heat map structure. So as issues start to arise on individual components, they'll turn from green to red or orange, depending on the level of severity. And what's important about that is that this drives your attention quickly to where you do need to look, and just as importantly, where you don't need to look in your environment. And with each of these components, as you click on them, you have resource utilization on the top right, you have context-specific health checks, as well as any alerts that are firing off based off the embedded intelligence and automation. So as issues start to arise, you'll want to click on a component that's turned red to get an understanding of what is causing the performance issues. Now, this page, I'll do some quick navigation here. The top left, you have the ability to toggle between multiple different Citrix sites, so whether they're active, passive setup. You have an infrastructure view here where you can see any NetScalers, your storefront servers, your delivery controllers, and any other supporting servers in the environment. You have this delivery layer view, which breaks things out from a logical perspective, where you have the delivery controllers, your delivery groups, mapped back to the machine catalog, and the gold image if available. And then you have the machine layer, taking all those components, showing you again how they're correlated with one another, down to the hypervisor cluster and individual hypervisor host that was supporting that group. And this view is most commonly used as a knock view because you can quickly, within just a couple clicks, see the overall health of the environment, but it can also be used as a troubleshooting stop because these all have average end user experience metrics applied to them so that you can quickly see if there's high round trip time. Does that correlate with high storage latency or high CPU utilization on the respective components? So again, great knock view to be able to quickly understand resource consumption at a high level. Now, say if you want to investigate for an individual user where it's not a macro issue, maybe it's just that one user that could potentially be having issues. Where you go is back to that Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop session display. We're back into that user session. And what we have here are performance metrics from the session host and the hypervisor host. Now, just to show what you have with the session host, and this is a VDI lab environment, but it'd be the same thing, for a XenApp environment, where you have CPU utilization, all correlated for the time frame of the user session. You have memory percentage, you have storage IOPS and disk latency that, again, you can quickly look at and come to conclusions as to if it's a resource utilization issue on that session host. And for the hypervisor host, where you have CPU metrics, memory, we have all the data stores that are attached, as well as each VM that was being supported by that hypervisor host during the time frame of that session, because maybe it wasn't, that particular user that you're investigating that was having they were doing anything wrong. Maybe it was some other VMs that were being supported by that same host, and they were the ones that were all utilizing the CPU and memory that was causing performance issues for a number of different users that were all being supported by that same hypervisor host. With that, let me transition back to the slides here, and I believe the next scenario that we're going to be talking about is with end user productivity, and I'm going to pass this over to Scott.
Thanks, Avi. Since the start of the pandemic, we have the calls have escalated on whether it's an owner, director, manager, end users starting to work from home or being scattered in different offices. We're asking if there's any way to report on their productivity levels while the employees are working from home or wherever they're working from. Is there any way to monitor this? So we turned to Goliath tools which runs the reports around end user productivity. We can now determine how many hours a user is actually active in their session and what's true activity versus when they're not being active in the session, which the Goliath tools can do versus using Citrix Director to try to figure out how long they've been connected. The productivity reports will show each time a user connects how long they've been connected. If we can go to the next slide, I believe that shows what a sample report on the duration of the connection, the true interaction with the connection as well. So if someone is, let's say, loaded up a website and they walk away from the machine, it doesn't count that as true activity. So we're able to get detailed reports, and we're also able to schedule the reports as well for whoever is looking for, whether it's the owner or whether it's director of the department. We're able to schedule these and have them either go out daily or for the frequency that they are looking to see what's going on with the end users. And this is escalated, again, since the start of the pandemic. The calls we get about this, really we get more calls about this than anything else on how can we monitor what the end user is doing. And this has really helped us be able to detail this out for our clients. And with that, I'll turn it back to Avi.
Great, thanks, Scott. And I think those are great examples. On my end, we're hearing that from, clients all the time as far as trying to get some insight into the level of productivity for their end users, not just from a big brother perspective, but say if you have typical high performing end users that are, really, they typically crush their job, but now all of a sudden they're, having troubles at home where they're not able to be as productive just because of the new, work from home initiative. Our clients have been able to use this to be able to get a better understanding on that, and then be able to say, hey, we see that, you could be having some trouble being as productive as you would be in the office. Is there anything that we can do as an IT team to be able to better support you? I'll kind of run through this report at a high level. Again, this can be run on demand, on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. It can be sent to different business line managers. And what this report is, again, showing is the level of interaction within the user Citrix session. So we'll take Randy as an example here. You have Randy's client IP address, how he connected into the environment, the server that he was connected to, the session start time, session change time, so whether it was a logged off session, disconnected, or if it was still an active session. And so what you're able to see, Randy's session was for 9 hours. He interacted within his session for 7 of those 9 hours. And this interaction metric is compiled from a number of different data sources, some which include, mouse click, keyboard input, generating ICA traffic. So it's an accurate representation of how productive that user was actually being within their session, instead of just, clicking the mouse once every, 10 minutes to kind of get over some of those different policies and whatnot that are currently set up that could show the user as being active, but in reality, they're not doing too much work. You have the interaction percentage and then max inactivity. So maybe Randy stepped out for 42 minutes or so. And for XenApp environments, you'll be able to see the published applications that are being utilized as well. Now, that is just one report that we have. Part of the, one of the main benefits of the technology is that we're collecting a broad and deep subset of data that can be used in a number of different ways. And just to touch on some of the data points that we're collecting in the top left, you're able to see end user performance, so end user experience metrics, ICA latency, connection speed at that end user's location where they're logging in from, end user activity of peak usage, application usage, license usage, system performance that you can see, the VM performance, CPU, memory, disk, and you're able to use all this information in a number of different ways. Here's another example. You have this is an end user experience report where you're able to see, ICA latency, logon duration. Again, these can all be run however fits the business best. Did you want to see just the top 20 ICA, the top 20 users with the highest ICA latency? Did you want to see just the top, did you want to see just a particular delivery group and how long the logon duration was for that group? And again, these can all be run in a number of different ways, whether that's, out of the box from the technology, it can be exported to CSV, Excel, PDF. And here are a couple other different, another thing is that we have integration into, or we can have these reports be set up through, Power BI or Tableau. So data visualization tools so that you can see here the average total logon times and be able to trend this over time, which has been very helpful, because then you can see if the changes that you could be making in the environment, are they actually helping or could they be hurting the environment? And for management, this is something that's a little bit easier to read versus individual user sessions and whatnot. And with that, to kind of touch on everything that we just focused on, from how to use the technology to be proactive, how to be able to troubleshoot end user experience issues and diagnose what the root cause of the poor performance is, and being able to report on it. Right here, this just kind of is quick slide as far as showing how we do all this, where it's with embedded intelligence and automation to proactively prevent end user issues from ever rising with the proactive functionality within the technology. We have that broad and deep subset of data across the entire delivery infrastructure that you can quickly be able to understand end user behavior and end user performance issues to be able to quickly diagnose what the root cause of performance issues could be. And then historical reports and analytics, where that can help with data-driven conversations, whether that's internally, other vendors, or end users, and be able to use that information to be able to trend over a period of time for capacity planning and projects. Now, with that, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to pass it over to Simon, see if there were any final comments, and then also just to see if if for anyone who's interested in SSI services, how would they be able to learn more?
Thanks, Avi. So yeah, one thing SSI has been growing significantly with is obviously Citrix deployments, and that led to a very significant partnership with Goliath to really not only help our customers, but help SSI, right? The more we can decrease support tickets, the better it is for our organization, because that drives customer experience. I'm often asked at this point, there's a lot of desktop as a service providers out there, hundreds, possibly thousands. Why SSI, and what sets you apart? For one, we've had the team at Citrix Diamond validate our infrastructure. So we are setting the standard or meeting the bar for Citrix's expectations to the point where they feel comfortable recommending SSI as a Citrix service provider. We are also Citrix Ready certified, and we run Citrix environments not just in public cloud, Azure and AWS, but also our own private data centers. So those clients who are looking away from the public cloud option for security, compliance reasons have an alternative option with SSI. The other component of what makes SSI special is that we are not just a desktop as a service company. Many out there will provide a low-cost desktop that is cookie cutter to standard. It doesn't add a lot of operational value. We specialize in complex environments, but not just from our data center or public cloud. We will help you as an organization build out a Citrix environment with the standards that we've learned from Citrix and the standards that we have learned from our expertise in deploying hundreds of Citrix environments over the last 4 to 8 years that we've grown this practice. We will also remediate existing environments. If you have problems or challenges that are lingering, you don't have the resources internally to get to them or the skill set, we can help remediate those existing environments. We will also manage on-premise environments. So that takes care of the Citrix updates, troubleshooting. Anything you need around Citrix can be handled by SSI's technicians. And finally, we offer alternative licensing options. Monthly pay-as-you-go licensing for Citrix consumption, as an example. And there are business cases out there that makes a lot of sense, right? If you have seasonal workforce or you fluctuate greatly. Really what we're looking to do and to help you is have a conversation. So there is many ways we can engage. My contact information is on the slide. We can do a formal assessment looking for issues in your environment. We can talk through financial arguments. We can look at licensing models, and we can look at how we partner with Goliath to troubleshoot some of your issues. If anyone on the call does have questions and wants to talk with us further, please reach out. My contact information is in the bright orange box. And with that said, I'll pass this back to Stacy.